The battlefield was chaos. Explosions ripped through the ground, sending smoke and debris into the air. Laser fire crisscrossed the dark sky as the human soldiers of Omega Squad fought against the monstrous Scarvol. Captain Elias Voss moved like a ghost, his rifle spitting death with every pull of the trigger. His squad was outnumbered, but they held their ground. "Captain, we need to fall back," his lieutenant shouted over the comms. "Enemy reinforcements incoming." Elias gritted his teeth. They had come to this ruined planet for a simple rescue mission. Retrieve intelligence, avoid unnecessary fights. But now, they were stuck in a full-scale battle. He scanned the battlefield, looking for an escape route. That was when he saw her. A few meters away, half buried under rubble, was a woman. An alien, but not Scarvol. She had silver skin that shimmered in the dim light, long dark hair spread across the ground like silk. Her royal armor, though cracked and bloodied, bore the sigil of the Zenari Empire. Her violet eyes barely remained open, her breath shallow. "A princess," Elias muttered. What was a Zenari royal doing here? The Zenari Empire was neutral in this war. If the Scarvol had attacked her, it meant something bigger was happening. Elias didn't have time to think. He sprinted through the battlefield, dodging fire and leaping over fallen enemies. The princess groaned softly as he knelt beside her. "Stay with me," he said, pressing his fingers against her neck. Weak pulse, but she was alive. "You're not dying today." She murmured something in her native tongue, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias didn't understand, but her eyes locked onto his, pleading, desperate. He had seen that look before. She wanted to live. "Captain, what are you doing?" His lieutenant's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Saving a life," Elias replied. He lifted the princess into his arms, her body limp against his chest. More Scarvol soldiers appeared over the ridge, their reptilian faces twisted in rage. They had realized their prize was being taken. A deep, guttural roar filled the battlefield as they charged. Elias turned, running as fast as his legs could carry him. His squad covered him, laying down suppressive fire. The Iron Resolve. Their warship was still orbiting above, but the enemy was closing in too fast. "Riker, get me a way out," Elias barked. "We have a Scarvol dropship nearby, barely functional," Riker answered. "It's our best shot." "Then let's move." Elias carried the princess toward the enemy ship, bullets and lasers flying past him. A Scarvol warrior lunged at him with a plasma blade. He spun, firing point-blank into its chest. The creature fell, but more took its place. As the dropship came into view, alarms blared. The enemy was locking onto them. Elias gritted his teeth. He was not dying here. Not today. "Get us in the air," he shouted. With the princess in his arms and death chasing his heels, Elias leaped into the ship as the hatch slammed shut behind him. The enemy dropship trembled as it lifted off the ground. Captain Elias Voss barely had time to catch his breath before an explosion rocked the ship. Red warning lights flashed inside the cockpit. The ship was damaged, barely holding together. "Riker, get this thing moving," Elias shouted as he laid the injured princess on the floor. "I'm trying, Captain. Engines are fried, and Scarvol warships are locking onto us." Riker yelled back, his hands flying over the controls. The dropship lurched, metal groaning under the strain. Elias looked down at Princess Soraya. Her silver skin had turned pale, her breathing shallow. Blood dripped from a wound on her side. She was in bad shape. Elias tore a piece of fabric from his sleeve and pressed it against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me, princess," he muttered. Her violet eyes fluttered open, barely focusing on him. She whispered something in her alien language, her voice weak. Elias couldn't understand, but the look in her eyes told him everything. She was afraid. The ship shook again as laser fire struck its side. "They're not letting us leave," Riker shouted. "Scarvol warships incoming." Elias grabbed the comm. "Iron Resolve, do you copy?" We need immediate extraction. A burst of static. Then a reply. Captain Voss, you're flying an enemy vessel. Our gunners have you marked as hostile. Identify yourself. Are you serious? Elias growled. It's me, damn it. Call off the fire. Outside the ship, 3 Scar-Vol fighters appeared, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. They weren't planning to capture. They were going to destroy. Elias cursed under his breath. Riker, can you lose them? In this piece of junk? Not likely. Elias scanned the cockpit. Then he saw it, a small lever near the control panel. A manual override for the ship's thrusters. A risky move, but their only chance. Hold on, Elias said. He pulled the lever. The ship jerked violently, throwing everyone against the walls. The engines roared to life, shooting them forward at an insane speed. The sudden acceleration sent them hurtling toward the upper atmosphere, breaking through the clouds. The enemy fighters followed, firing relentlessly. Come on, come on. Riker gritted his teeth. Then, a massive shadow appeared above them, the Iron Resolve. The Terran warship had finally locked onto their location. Captain, we have visual on your ship, the comms officer said. Bringing you in now. A beam of blue light surrounded the dropship. A tractor beam. The Iron Resolve pulled them in just as the Scar-Vol opened fire. The enemy shots missed by inches. The dropship crashed onto the landing bay of the human warship, metal screeching as it slid across the floor. Elias grabbed the princess, shielding her with his body. Then, silence. They had made it. Elias let out a breath, but he knew this was just the beginning. You said. The landing bay of the Iron Resolve was a mess of smoke and sparks. The stolen Scar-Vol dropship had barely survived the escape, and now it sat in the middle of the hangar like a wounded beast. The moment the hatch hissed open, Terran soldiers surrounded it, rifles aimed, ready for a fight. Stand down. Captain Elias Voss barked as he stepped out, carrying Princess Soraya in his arms. She's not the enemy. The soldiers hesitated but did not lower their weapons. A tall officer stepped forward. Commander Graves, a man known for his cold discipline. His sharp eyes flicked between Elias and the alien princess. You have exactly 5 seconds to explain why you're bringing an enemy vessel onto my ship, Captain, Graves said, voice tight with anger. Elias clenched his jaw. We were stranded. She was left to die by the Scar-Vol. I couldn't leave her behind. Graves studied the unconscious princess, her silver skin pale, her elegant armor stained with blood. He sighed. Get her to the med bay. Now. 2 medics rushed forward, carefully taking Soraya from Elias. He watched as they hurried her toward the medical wing. As soon as she was out of sight, Graves turned back to Elias. You're in deep trouble, Voss. Stealing an enemy ship, ignoring orders. Elias exhaled. Add it to my record. Graves narrowed his eyes but said nothing. Report to debriefing in 1 hour. Hours later, medical bay. Elias sat beside Soraya's bed, arms crossed, exhaustion pressing on him like a weight. The medical team had stabilized her, but she was still weak. Machines beeped softly, monitoring her vitals. Then she stirred. Her violet eyes slowly opened, unfocused at first, then sharp with awareness. She turned her head, spotting Elias. You live, she whispered, her voice weak but steady. Elias smirked. Yeah, you too. Soraya studied him for a long moment, then slowly pushed herself up. Elias reached out to help, but she shook her head, proud even in weakness. Then she did something unexpected. She pressed a fist over her heart and bowed her head slightly. Elias frowned. What was that? Soraya's gaze locked onto his. A Zenari life debt. Elias blinked. A what? She took a slow breath. You saved my life. In Zenari culture, that means my life now belongs to you until I can repay the debt. Elias let out a short laugh. That's not necessary. Soraya's expression didn't change. It is not your choice. Elias stared at her, trying to process what this meant. He had rescued her because it was the right thing to do. He wasn't expecting a reward, and certainly not this. Before he could respond, the ship's alarms blared. The Scarvol had found them. The iron resolve shook as alarms blared through the corridors. Red warning lights flashed, and the voice of the ship's eye echoed over the comms. Enemy warships detected. Scarvol fleet approaching. Captain Elias Voss sprang to his feet, his exhaustion forgotten. Beside him, Princess Soraya looked alert despite her injuries. "The Scarvol," she muttered. "They have come for me." Elias clenched his fists. "They won't get you." He rushed out of the medical bay, Soraya following closely. In the command center, Commander Graves stood over the holographic display, watching as 3 massive Scarvol battleships approach. "They're demanding we hand over the princess," Graves said, turning to Elias. "Now tell me, why would the Scarvol be so desperate to get her back?" Soraya stepped forward, her violet eyes burning with defiance. "Because I was meant to die on that battlefield." The room fell silent. Soraya continued, her voice cold. "The Zenari Empire has always been neutral, but my father's advisors, his own council, made a secret deal. They offered me to the Scarvol as a sacrifice for peace. My death would have sealed their alliance." Elias felt his blood boil. "So your own people betrayed you?" Soraya nodded. "And now, they must erase the mistake. If I return to Zenari space, they will finish what they started. And if the Scarvol capture me, they will make an example of me." Graves swore under his breath. "And now we're caught in the middle of this mess." A sharp beep interrupted them. A transmission from the Terran High Command. The face of Admiral Kane, a hardened old soldier, appeared on the holoscreen. "Commander Graves," Kane said in a firm voice, "we've received demands from both the Scarvol and the Zenari Empire. They want the princess turned over immediately." Elias stepped forward. "Sir, we can't do that. If we hand her over, she's dead." Kane's expression remained unreadable. "This isn't our fight, Captain. The Terran Republic cannot afford a war with the Scarvol or the Zenari. We are ordering you to surrender her." Elias felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "You're just going to let her be executed." "That's an order, Captain," Kane said. "Prepare the prisoner for transfer." The transmission cut off. The room was silent. Soraya lifted her chin. "So this is how humanity repays its debts." Elias exhaled slowly. He looked at her, really looked at her, the proud warrior spirit in her eyes, the way she refused to show fear. He had saved her life once. Could he let her be taken now? Elias turned to Graves. "Commander, I can't follow that order." Graves sighed. "Then you better have a plan, Captain. Because if you go against High Command, you're on your own." Elias nodded. He already knew what he had to do. They had to escape. The air inside the Iron Resolve was thick with tension. The order from High Command was clear: surrender Princess Soraya. But Captain Elias Voss had made his choice. He would not hand her over to die. Now he just had to figure out how to escape a heavily armed battleship while surrounded by enemy warships. Elias turned to Commander Graves. "How long before the transfer?" 30 minutes, Graves replied. "A diplomatic shuttle is on the way." Elias nodded. "That means we have 30 minutes to disappear." Graves folded his arms. "You're insane, Voss. If you fail, you'll be labeled a traitor." Elias smirked. "Good thing I don't plan on failing." The plan. Elias, Soraya, and Riker, his best pilot, moved quickly through the corridors. Every hallway was crawling with Terran soldiers, their orders clear: guard the princess until the shuttle arrives. "We can't fight our way out," Riker muttered. "Too many troops." "We won't fight," Elias said. He pulled a stolen officer's ID badge from his pocket. "We'll trick them." Soraya raised an eyebrow. "You stole that?" Elias grinned. "Borrowed. Using the ID, They entered the restricted hangar bay where several stealth ships were docked. These small, fast vessels were designed for secret missions, perfect for their escape. Just as they reached the nearest ship, a voice rang out. "Stop right there." A squad of Terran soldiers stood at the entrance, rifles aimed. The leader, a strict officer named Lieutenant Hayes, stepped forward. "Captain Voss, what are you doing here?" Elias put on his best serious face. "High Command changed the plan. New orders. Princess Soraya is being moved under stealth protocol. I need to take her now." Hayes frowned. "That wasn't in the orders I received." Elias sighed and shook his head. "Come on, Hayes. Do you think they tell you everything? This comes from the top. Admiral Kane himself." Hayes hesitated. He was buying it. Then Soraya groaned softly and leaned against Elias. "She's injured," Elias added quickly. "She needs medical attention. Fast." Hayes sighed, lowering his weapon. "Fine. Get her out of here." Elias nodded and guided Soraya toward the stealth ship. Just as the doors closed behind them, Riker fired up the engines. "Hang on," Riker shouted as the ship roared to life. The stealth craft shot out of the hangar just as the alarms blared. The Iron Resolve had realized the trick. "Enemy ships incoming." Riker yelled. "We're gonna have to fight our way out." Outside, Scarvul warships were waiting. The Iron Resolve had also launched fighters. They were trapped between two deadly forces. Elias gripped the controls. "Then let's make them work for it." With the entire galaxy hunting them, Elias and Soraya had only one choice: run like hell. The stealth ship shot through space, engines burning hot as Elias Voss gripped the controls. Behind them, the Iron Resolve had gone on full alert, scrambling fighters to pursue them. In front, 3 massive Scarvul warships waited like hungry predators. "We're trapped," Riker shouted, his hands flying over the ship's systems. "Both sides want us dead." Princess Soraya held onto her seat, her violet eyes fixed on the display. "Do we have weapons?" "Not enough to fight our way out," Elias growled. "We need a different plan." The comms crackled, and an all-too-familiar voice filled the cockpit. "Captain Voss." Admiral Kane's voice was sharp. "Turn back now. This is your last warning." Elias didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Riker. "Do we still have stealth systems?" "Partially. But if we use them now, the Scarvul will still detect us. They're too close." Elias cursed under his breath. If they tried to run, the Scarvul would blast them into space dust. If they turned back, the Terrans would lock them up and hand Soraya over to her enemies. Soraya straightened. "I have an idea." Elias glanced at her. "Let's hear it." She pointed at the display. "The Scarvul do not know your ship has me inside. They think you're simply running. If we make them believe I'm already dead, they may break off pursuit." Riker snorted. "And how do we do that?" Soraya took a slow breath. "By faking my execution." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You want to fake your own death. How?" Soraya tapped the console. "Transmit a distress signal. Say I was on board, but the ship was hit and destroyed. Then, while their sensors are blinded by the explosion, we slip away using stealth." Riker whistled. "That's insane." Elias smirked. "Which means it just might work." The gamble. Minutes later, the distress signal was sent. "This is Captain Elias Voss. We have sustained heavy fire. Princess Soraya is critically wounded. Repeat, critically wounded. Our ship is going down." As soon as the message was out, Riker detonated a decoy probe behind them. Boom! The explosion lit up the void, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. The blast was big enough to disrupt enemy scanners. On their screens, Soraya's life signs vanished. Elias gripped the controls. Engaging stealth. Now. The ship shimmered, disappearing from enemy radar, just as the Scarvul ships halted. "They're hesitating," Riker whispered. "They think she's dead." On the comms, they heard Scarval warlords arguing in their guttural language. Then, their warships pulled back. It had worked. Elias let out a breath. We're clear. Soraya sat back, closing her eyes. Then, Captain Voss, you have just stolen a princess from death itself. Elias smirked. Yeah. And now, the whole damned galaxy is after us. The stolen stealth ship drifted in the vast emptiness of space, hidden from prying eyes. The engines hummed softly, running at minimum power to avoid detection. Inside the cockpit, Captain Elias Voss watched the radar, making sure no ships were following them. For now, they were safe. But he knew it wouldn't last. Riker let out a long breath. I can't believe that actually worked. Princess Soraya, sitting across from them, folded her arms. The Scarval may believe I'm dead for now, but it won't take them long to figure out the truth. Elias nodded, which means we need a plan. Fast. He turned to Riker. What's our fuel situation? Not great, Riker muttered, checking the readings. We have enough for one more jump, maybe two if we stretch it. After that, we're stranded. Elias rubbed his temple. We need a safe place to land, refuel, and lay low. Soraya leaned forward. I may know such a place. Elias raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Soraya's violet eyes locked onto his. There is a hidden Zenari outpost on the edge of neutral space. My father never officially recognized it, but it exists. If we go there, I may be able to call for allies, those still loyal to me. Riker scoffed. And if they're not loyal? Then we die, Soraya said simply. Elias smirked. Sounds about right. The chase begins. Elias punched in the coordinates, and the ship's engines roared to life. The stars stretched into streaks of light as they entered hyperspace. But they weren't alone. Only minutes into the jump, alarms blared. Captain. Riker's voice was tense. We've got company. Elias checked the scanners. His stomach dropped. A Terran battleship had locked onto them, tracking their jump. How the hell did they find us? Elias muttered. Riker's fingers flew across the controls. They must have planted a tracking signal on our ship before we left. Soraya tensed. Can we outrun them? Elias narrowed his eyes. Not in a fair fight. Riker turned. So what do we do? Elias took a deep breath. We don't fight fair. He cut the engines. The sudden loss of power made the ship jolt, throwing everyone forward. Soraya gripped the edge of her seat. What are you doing? Elias grinned, giving them a false target. Without the engine's signature, their ship blended into the cosmic radiation around them, disappearing from sensors. Seconds later, the Terran battleship shot past them, chasing a ghost signal. Riker whooped. Hell yeah, Captain. Elias smirked. They'll figure it out soon, but by then, we'll be long gone. Soraya studied him with admiration. You are unpredictable, Captain Voss. Elias shrugged. That's why I'm still alive. With their pursuers lost, the ship continued toward the hidden outpost. But something told Elias. Their real troubles were only beginning. The stolen stealth ship emerged from hyperspace, arriving at the edge of neutral space. Before them, surrounded by swirling cosmic dust, was a massive asteroid. But it wasn't just a rock. Nestled inside its hollowed-out core was a secret Zenari outpost, hidden from enemy eyes. Flickering lights and docking platforms jutted out from the asteroid's surface, barely visible against the dark void of space. Elias Voss let out a low whistle. Nice hideout. Princess Soraya gave a small nod. It was built for emergencies, but I do not know who still remains loyal to me. Riker frowned. Let's hope they don't just shoot us down. Elias activated the comms. Unidentified Zenari outpost. This is Captain Elias Voss. Requesting clearance to land. Static filled the cockpit. Then, a deep voice replied, Identify yourself. Soraya leaned forward. This is Princess Soraya of the Zenari Empire. I seek sanctuary. Silence. Then, the docking lights turned green. Permission granted. Land immediately. Elias exchanged a glance with Riker. That was too easy. Soraya's expression was unreadable. We will soon see if this is a trap or not. An uncertain welcome. The ship touched down on the metallic docking bay, steam hissing from the landing gears. As the hatch opened, armed Zenari soldiers were already waiting. Their weapons were not raised, but their expressions were cold. An older Zenari, dressed in royal military armor, stepped forward. His golden eyes locked onto Soraya. "You should be dead," he said. Soraya lifted her chin. "I am not so easy to kill, General Corval." Elias observed the exchange, his hand resting near his blaster. He didn't trust this situation one bit. Corval's gaze shifted to Elias. "And this is the human responsible for your survival." Soraya nodded. "Yes, he saved my life." Corval studied Elias for a long moment. Strange. Humans do not often involve themselves in Zenari affairs. Elias smirked. "We make exceptions sometimes." Corval exhaled, then motioned toward the corridor. "Come, we must speak in private." Betrayal in the shadows. The group was led into a dimly lit war room. Holograms flickered, displaying maps of the galaxy. It was clear the Zenari rebels had been monitoring the war closely. Soraya turned to Corval. "You remained hidden while my father's council betrayed me. Why?" Corval's expression darkened. "Because, Princess, your father's empire is collapsing. The Scarvol are preparing to invade Zenari space, and the council has already surrendered." Soraya's fists clenched. "They gave up." Corval nodded grimly. "They traded your life for temporary peace, but peace will not last. The Scarvol want full control." Elias crossed his arms. "So what now?" Corval's golden eyes flicked between Elias and Soraya. "Now, Princess, we decide whether to run or fight for your throne." The war room fell into heavy silence. Princess Soraya stared at the flickering holograms, her hands clenched into fists. The empire her father had built, her empire, was being handed over like a prize. The council had betrayed her. The Scarvol were preparing to invade. And all she had left were a handful of rebels and a human warrior who had no reason to stay. Elias Voss leaned against the table, arms crossed. "So, what's the plan, Your Highness? Are we running or fighting?" Soraya's violet eyes burned with determination. "I do not run." Corval gave a small nod of approval. "Then you will need an army." Riker scoffed. "We don't have an army." Corval smirked. "Not yet." The call to arms. Corval tapped a control panel, and a new hologram appeared, a map showing hidden rebel cells spread across the Zenari territories. "There are those who still believe in the princess. If we send out the right message, they will come." Elias rubbed his chin. "A message is easy to send, but making sure they answer, that's the real challenge." Soraya stepped forward. "Then we must give them a reason to fight." Corval's golden eyes gleamed. "Then we strike first." The first battle. The plan was set. The Scarvol were moving supplies to a high-security outpost on the edge of Zenari space. If Soraya's forces could take control of it, they would gain weapons, ships, and the attention of every rebel in the sector. Elias smirked. "Stealing from the Scarvol. Now that's my kind of mission." A few hours later, the stolen stealth ship soared toward the enemy outpost, flying low to avoid detection. Inside the cockpit, Riker checked the weapon systems. "We've got one shot at this. If they call for reinforcements, we're dead." Elias cracked his knuckles. "Then let's make it count." Fire and fury. The attack began in an instant. Elias dived the ship toward the outpost, firing torpedoes at the shield generators. Explosions tore through the base, sending fire and debris into space. Zenari rebels, already hidden among the outpost's workers, sprang into action, overpowering guards and seizing control of turrets. Soraya led the charge inside, her blade clashing against Scarvul warriors as the halls erupted in battle. Elias fought by her side, his blaster dropping enemies with deadly precision. The enemy commander, a massive Scarvul general, roared in anger. "You are already defeated, princess. Your empire belongs to us." Soraya's eyes flashed. "Not today." With a swift strike, she drove her blade through the general's chest. The outpost was theirs. The first victory had been won. As the rebel flag rose above the base, signals went out across the galaxy. Princess Soraya was alive, and she was ready to take back her throne. The Zenari outpost was no longer silent. The halls that once belonged to the Scarvul were now filled with cheering rebels. The victory had spread like wildfire, across hidden channels, encrypted messages, and whispered rumors. Princess Soraya was alive, and she was fighting back. Elias Voss stood on a balcony overlooking the base. Fighters, smugglers, defectors, and old war veterans were arriving every hour, answering the call. The princess now had an army. Riker joined him, letting out a low whistle. "I gotta admit, Cap, I didn't think we'd live this long." Elias smirked. "Me neither." Behind them, Soraya approached, her violet eyes burning with newfound determination. She was no longer just a fugitive princess. She was becoming a leader of warriors. A dangerous proposal. Soraya stopped beside Elias. "The people are ready. The time has come to take back my home." Elias studied her. "You're talking about attacking the royal palace." She nodded. "The Scarvul will not expect a direct assault. If we strike now, before they fully secure power, we have a chance to drive them out." Riker scoffed. "A chance? More like a suicide mission." Soraya smiled faintly. "Then we must make sure we do not die." Elias chuckled. "Simple plan. I like it." He turned serious. "You realize, if you win, things won't be the same. You'll be a queen. You'll have duties. Politics." Soraya met his gaze. "I will have my people. My empire." A pause. "And you?" she asked softly. Elias exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He had spent his life as a rogue, a soldier for hire, a man with no home, no flag, no cause. But now, he had one. He smirked. "I suppose every queen needs a warrior." The final battle. The assault on the Zenari capital was fast and brutal. Fighters swarmed the skies, disabling enemy defenses as Soraya's forces landed in the city. Elias led the charge through the palace gates, blasting through Scarvul warriors with deadly precision. Inside, Soraya confronted the Zenari council, who had betrayed her to save their own skins. "Your time is over," she declared. "You sold our empire to invaders, and now you will answer for it." The council members trembled, knowing their fate. The final battle raged through the city, but soon the rebels emerged victorious. The Scarvul were forced out of Zenari space, their invasion shattered, and as the sun rose over the palace, Soraya stood before her people, not as a fallen princess, but as their new queen. A warrior's choice. Elias watched from a distance. He had helped her win, but his job was done. Soraya turned, stepping toward him. "You are not leaving," she said. It was not a question. Elias smirked. "What makes you so sure?" She smiled. "Because you are not just a warrior. You are my warrior." Elias chuckled. Maybe having a home wasn't so bad after all.